And then let's talk now about the main pathway which we support for immigration or obtaining rights in Brazil. So that is the startup investor pathway. So pretty much Brazil has three main pathways by which a physical person, so like a human being, not a company, can invest in the country and obtain immigration rights directly as a result. So the program which has the most approvals is the real estate investor program, which requires around $190,000 investment. With some caveats, it can be less, and that results today in a 4-year temporary residency pathway that eventually converts to permanent residency. Then there is the company investor pathway, and that requires an investment of between 95 and 100,000 US dollars in order to invest that in a company that is actively contributing to the Brazilian economy. And that is the second most common pathway for investment-based residency. And effectively, also, this pathway results in permanent residency from day one, much like the startup investor visa does as well. And so that does bring us then to what we think is the hidden opportunity, which is the startup investor visa. So the startup investor visa is actually a subcategory of the company investor visa, but for administrative purposes, it's considered as a separate pathway because of its own conditions. But it allows for a much smaller capital investment in Brazil and also results in permanent residency. So while this program allows for an investment that's at a fraction of the cost of the regular company investor pathway, the biggest thing to know is that it comes with stringent requirements, but once you know how to comply with those requirements, you can pass through. That said, it's really limited in usage by comparison to the other two pathways. But once you know how it works, it's just as fast and it has permanent results, which is really incredible. So we think it's one of the most hidden opportunities for residency investment, not only in South America, but anywhere in the world. To give you an idea, when I say I think it's one of the best values in the world, we don't have Angola on this chart because I don't know anyone that's looking for residency by investment in Angola from the US or Europe. But taking a look at sort of some of the countries that have programs that are comparable, you see really how clear the value is in the Brazil startup investor pathway. Permanent residency that is at a fraction of the cost of some of these programs that are very rarely permanent. So what are the options that you have under this program? Again, you're making an investment into a qualifying company in Brazil that meets criterias that are set out by federal Brazilian law. And you invest in either a pre-existing Brazilian company that meets the criteria, or you open your own Brazilian company which meet those criteria, in which case you can pretty much set up in any state in the country, but you have to really comply with certain rules on where that location is. So in particular, the business must demonstrate innovative activity and meet these criteria. So what counts as innovative and what really makes the criteria work? So the law itself has kind of two sub pathways that talk about this. There's really a pathway that's like, here's a checklist of things that make a company look like a startup on paper. And here is a set of criteria to assess the novelty of the innovation. Overall, a bureaucrat doesn't really like to assess the novelty of innovation. So ultimately, the most suggested and most followed path is the pathway of showing these criteria and then demonstrating that the company is innovative. So the criteria that has to be met, you need to meet at least one of the following criteria on this page. Located in a tech park, which is a federally mandated thing under Brazilian law. Located in an incubator, usually an incubator associated with a university. Direct support and usually financial support from a government innovation agency, or being a finalist in a government startup program. One of these criteria has to be met. And so one of the things that's really distinct about this program as an advantage is that full-time physical presence is not required in Brazil. What is required is at least 15 days physical presence every 2 years. Plus, you'll need to be in Brazil to renew your residency card when it expires. You do have to maintain the capital in Brazil for 3 years, and a verification that the same capital amount is there does occur after 3 years. That's done remotely in most cases by the police. And it's not the case that you are going to get citizenship if you don't live in Brazil. Effectively, this program allows you to live in Brazil. There's no additional benefits for naturalization through this program. But if you do stay in Brazil after getting the permanent residency and you stay there for 4 years, 9 months out of the year, then you can naturalize as a Brazilian citizen, which generally takes about a year to process. How does it work in practice? Again, it depends on if you're setting up your own company or if you're investing in a pre-existing company that is effectively a startup. But so generally, it starts out with a strategy of figuring out what you're going to do. Are you more interested in your own company or investing in another? If you need to find another, you need to find that company, do the due diligence to make sure that it's going to be standing for 3 years and that they're a legitimate partner for you. And well, that's one place that we come in. If you're going to open your own company, you have to make sure that it meets the criteria and has an innovative focus. Then once that is all set up, there is the actual investment process itself, which is very bureaucratic and comes with a lot of steps of know your customer or KYC requirements, probably both from your bank and the receiving bank in Brazil that will have to open up the account for you. But in this case, the money has to come from you, the single physical person, from a bank account in your name into Brazil. So you can't use any intermediary service like Wise, Revolut, or any of these other services. Then, once the capital is deployed and confirmed, it has to be integrated into the company documents. And once that's concluded, the application can be filed. In March 2026, the Brazilian administration announced that it was going to really speed up this process. So in some cases, it could be as quick as 16 days to get an approval. And then, depending on if you are physically in Brazil at the time of the application, or if you are outside of Brazil, you will need to then, if you get an approval, either go to the consulate or go directly to the federal police. But even if you have to go to the consulate first and get the visa, once you have the visa, you need to enter Brazil within 90 days. And once you enter into Brazil, you need to make the final step in this process, which is to register with the police. And you must make an appointment, file for an appointment within 30 days of entering Brazil. So to be very clear, for the legal filing for the immigration itself, that has to be done through a Brazilian lawyer, which we are not. We are really functioning as an intermediary to both help you navigate the administration and bureaucracy of Brazil and doing business with Brazil in your home country. We're also there to practically work as translators. And then when it comes to this investor pathway, we have a network of curated startups, which we have been building for the last months through our local partnerships in Brazil. We work on creating a network of vetted founders where we go in and we do the due diligence and work on really making sure we're looking at a potential partner for you if you elect to invest in an existing company instead of managing your own company. If you decide to manage your own company, we can provide you with a local associate, which you will need in order to open the company, as this is Brazilian law. We'll explain that all to you in an initial consultation. And then we can provide you with a lot of other advisory, such as, your accounting work and other legal partners. And all the while, we are keeping a lookout for law and visa updates, which may potentially impact you. And so this is sort of the scope of how we bring together our expertise lived experience as one of the few people who've gone through this program, and then the network that we've built and our legal partners to help you succeed in this program.